And this program is actually being recorded. Shane, say hello to Shane over there. Hi, Shane.
Hi, Shane.
Hi, everybody.
And so it'll be up on the website. And so if you want to go back over it and look over it, and if there are any questions, any parts that you missed, you can definitely review it. Our program is a journey through the wilderness, exploring faith from different religious perspectives. And so today we're going to have the perspective of the Buddhist tradition. Next week we'll have the Islamic perspective, and then on Wednesday, March 23rd, we'll have the Christian perspective, and we'll have Christian practices that help us walk a journey through the wilderness experience. And then finally, on March 30th, Wednesday, these are all Wednesdays, we'll have Yesebel Landau, who is a rabbi or a teacher at Hartford Seminary, and he will give us the Jewish perspective. Why are we doing this? Well, Lent is about the time when we learn about how to journey through the wilderness. In our tradition, the Christian tradition, all of the readings in Lent speak of a journey, the journey that Jesus makes to Jerusalem, the journey also of the children of Israel as they make their way from Egypt into the Promised Land. And this tradition of the wilderness is very powerful. And as you heard in prayer, the wilderness experience is a dangerous experience. It's one that fills many people with anxiety. How many of you have ever gone to camping? Camping. And but were you scared ever in camping? No. Some of you are. I have never been camping. And the thing I think about camping is going to maybe a campground with plumbing and maybe a bedroom, a cabin or something. I have never been out in the wilderness, nor do I want to be. Maybe I should. But why don't I ever go out into the wilderness like that? Because I think it's kind of scary. It's not something uncomfortable. It's something I'm not used to. So the wilderness is a place where we're not used to. But even in those places, God exists, and God calls us to find joy and hope. We've just come through a wilderness experience, and we still might be in the tailwinds of it, this pandemic experience. And faith communities, not only the Christian faith, but many faith communities, have struggled through this wilderness. And so that's why we're asking different faith traditions to kind of teach us, to help us to learn how they find God, how they find joy and hope, even as they have come through this wilderness experience. Because it's a human experience. And we learn from one another and we grow. And so today we have Dr. Lupton Tendar, who was a Tibetan Buddhist monk for 20 years. He holds a PhD in education. He's a very soft-spoken, lovely man. But he's very educated and has a wonderful sense of wisdom about him. He holds a PhD in education from the University of Rhode Island, and a Geshe, a doctorate degree in Buddhist studies from Deprong Loseng and Seleng Monastic University. He's a certified level 3 trainer in Kingian nonviolence, philosophy and strategy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. From the URI Center of Nonviolence and Peace Studies. He serves as the International Nonviolence Summer Institute Director, teaching nonviolence globally. He also coordinates and leads training initiatives and inner peace projects at the center. Lupton authored and published 2 poetry books, namely Peace, Rhythm of My Heart, and Love Beating My Heart. He teaches Tibetan Buddhism and the Art of Happiness at URR URI, and RISD, and the core seminar in nonviolence theory and research as a master's program in the international relations at URI. His primary research focuses on compassion, inner peace, mindfulness, well-being, and nonviolence pedagogy. And so we thank you, Doctor, for being with us, and we look forward to hearing wisdom. This a little bit. Okay. There it is.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. So nice to see you all here. And yes, I would like to share a little bit about Buddhism and journey through the wilderness. Maybe I will start with how I started this journey. So I was 12 years old boy in a public school, and one day my father came to school and he asked me if I would like to become a Buddhist monk. Yes, right? I remember I had a ticket for a school picnic that is coming up in 2 weeks or so. And but you know, thinking back, I didn't hesitate. So I said yes. And then I gave my picnic ticket to a friend. And you know, minutes later, my father and I went to the principal's office, and from there I got discharged from the school. I went with my father and stayed with my father and mother and sisters at home for a week. And then my father took me from Karnataka state in South India, where they resettled from Tibet, India. So my father and I, changed buses and trains, and then walked. And so the distance is not great. It's like 500 kilometers, or 300 miles, but it took more than 24 hours to get there. And so, so the journey started with taking buses and trains, and then walking, and then, monastery is supposed to be in a place where it is very remote. So we walk through, the fields and so on, and then eventually get to the monastery. But the monastery itself is called Monastic University, so it's pretty big. It has more than 1,500 resident monks at the time. Yes, so it's pretty big. And I was one of the youngest one at 12. And so my father stayed with me at the monastery for a week. And then during that time, he introduced me to a senior monk who will be my, teacher and main teacher. And so from there, we went to the abbot's office, and abbot asked me 2 main questions. So first one is, are you interested by yourself to become a monk? So I said yes, right? Well, I didn't know what it takes to be a monk, right? But somehow I didn't hesitate, so I said yes, and then I passed. Later on, I thought about it, right? So why did I say yes? And then, I remember from a much younger age, I remember seeing some monks and nuns in robes and with clerics and looks like smiling and peaceful. Probably there was, some sort of, impression or the expression that I liked from before, and maybe that's where I was, attracted to. And so, that thought came only afterwards, after I became a monk. So, and then the second question was, are you permitted by your parents? Mainly because I was minor at the time, right? Well, so I said yes. So my father actually helped me to get here, and so then yes, you are eligible. So from that day on, from that time, so the abbot took a sample of my hair, so he cut a small part of hair, and then he gave me a monk's robe, and then a new name. And so that is supposed to be a symbol to change the personality, change the way of thinking, and supposed to be looking for something, spirituality, something that is deeper than just the material goods. Okay? So that's how I started, and then I lived in the monastery for a little bit over 20 years, and during that time I studied, and it's interesting, the monk in the monastery, we didn't have age limit, right? So when I was 12, but some of my classmates were in their 30s, 40s, even 50s, and so we were studying together, we were debating with each other, and so on. So it's a very vibrant community, and then all of us took our, our role in cleaning, cooking, doing the common chores and so on. And then also we did have annual examinations and debate and so on. So that's how I, started and lived my experiences at the monastery, Buddhist monastery, temple monastery. And so during those years, of course, there are many monks around, and the monastery is in a remote area, and so there are so many things that we learn from each other, but also from the environment, from the nature and so on, and that's how I started learning from nature, and I enjoyed I still enjoy nature, and so I do write some longer poems and shorter poems and so on. I will start with two of them. So this is, have you seen the resting seagulls? Have you heard the cracking eyes? Have you walked the lonely trails? Have you smelt the burning wood? So that's right, just last month we have this, winter where we see seagulls, landing on the iced lake and so on, and we can hear the cracking of the ice when the weather gets warmer, and lonely trails at which you can reflect on what your health and well-being and your thought process and so on, and of course by sensing the smell of food, it gives us it awakes us thinking that we are in the world and we have a life to enjoy here. And this one I just wrote yesterday. Today's a little different. Leaves budding on trees, robins singing in the woods, crocuses blooming in the fields, and the moon smiling in the sky. Right? So we have, kind of winter going and spring coming. This is we see, and so we can enjoy and learn a lot of things from the nature of the wilderness. And So how does that relate to Buddhism and the Buddha, right? So I will tell you a brief story about Buddha, and many of you might have already known about Buddha. And so Buddha was not born a Buddha. Okay, he became a Buddha. Okay, so there was a young prince called Siddhartha. There was a young prince called Siddhartha in the Shakya kingdom in today's Lumbini is Nepal, India border. Okay, so at that time, there are many smaller kingdoms in India and that region, and as it is in different parts of the world, so many kingdoms. And so there was this kingdom called a Shakya kingdom, and a young boy Siddhartha was born. And Siddhartha, when he was born, his father Shuddhadana took him to a spiritual practitioner at that time. He is like an astrologer. In today's world, it's more like maybe somebody who does the readings and so on. Right? So the king took his young boy to a prince, to a reader, and then the readers told the king that, oh, your son will become either big emperor, or he will become a big great spiritual leader. Okay, so there was two possible options for this young prince, and so the father was worried. The king was worried because he wanted his son to become an emperor, right? He wanted his son to lead the kingdom and maybe get more power, more territory. So from a very young age, the king tried to hide difficult things from the young prince. So he tried, to surround the kingdom with comforts and beauty and luxury and things like that, because he wanted the young prince to be attracted towards the goodness of the world, to the mundane life, so that he will become more interested in becoming a king rather than seeking spirituality. Well, he was successful for some time. Then the young prince, he grew up, but he was very observant. When he goes out into the jungle, or when he goes out in other places, he was observing the nature. But the young, the king always, when he ventures out of the kingdom, he sends with a charioteer. At that time we didn't have cars or like that, so there were carts, there were chariots, they were driven by, pulled by horses. And so, the king tells the charioteer to make sure that the young prince didn't see any difficulties. Okay? So it kept going, and then eventually the young prince got married, and he even gave birth to a son. But then one day, as he was going out of the palace, he saw somebody who was aging, and then at one point he saw somebody who was sick. And then at one point he saw somebody who passed away. And then at one point he saw somebody who was in a monk's robe. And he was all shocked, right? He shocked at each of those occasions, and he asked the charioteer, like, what is that? How can a person become like that? Will I become like that at some point? Right? So he became so curious, and every answer was yes. So he understands that there is, a situation in the world that he likes to find solution. And so that turned him into, his interest into spirituality. And that's where, the beginning of his journey into the wilderness, he fled from the kingdom in the middle of the night. Yes. So he left his, father, his mom passed away at a very young age, so he left his wife and his young son, and he walked away. I mean, he went away from the kingdom in the middle of the night with his charioteer, and when he reached the jungle, and in the middle of the jungle, he cut his hair, sent that with the charioteer or the person, and then he gave away all his jewelry, his clothing, and and sent his horse back with this companion, and said, "Give this to my father and tell him that I went to the temple to seek spirituality." Okay, so he started, and of course the king was very sad, and of course he had a wife and so on. They were very sad, but he started to, so he went out into the jungle to seek spirituality, where he met with the masters at that time to start with concentration, deep concentration. So he started with that, and in the jungle, he met with 5 other people who, like him, like about his age, who were also in the jungle to seek spirituality. So they met together, and they thought they would practice together. And so they are called 5 companions. So 6 of them. So these 6 people, including the young Siddhartha, young prince, they started to practice extreme, extreme practices, so that, for example, like they were depriving themselves of food and drink. They were just depending on 1 grain a day or 1 leaf a day to survive. So now we can imagine today we talk about and we understand how important, the nutrition are and so on. So yes, they almost killed themselves. They almost, starved themselves to death. At which point, right, Siddhartha, the young prince, realized that, oh, I didn't come into the jungle to bring more suffering, right? I came here to find answers to suffering. So if I continue to starve, I will pass away without finding the answer that I'm seeking for. So he realized that, and he started to change his, practice, his method. Okay, so that is what he called. He reconsidered his path to what's called middle path. Okay, so middle path, we will, I think, later discuss a little bit about middle path. Basically, he was in the palace with all the, the abundance, and now he is in the jungle depriving himself, so much. So you see the 2 extremes: indulgence, but then, neglecting his health or, wellness and so on. So he said, I have to come in the middle so that I will be able to survive and continue to search for the answers. All right. So that's when he decided to accept rice puddings offered by a very kind girl in the village. Her name was Sujata. Sujata offered him rice pudding, and then gradually he started to eat. And he regained his energy and recovered his body, so that he could continue to meditate and seek spirituality. So eventually, so he went to the place called Bodh Gaya in India, in the state of Bihar. There is this huge Bodhi tree is called people tree, and this is a scientific botanical name. And so he went over there, and he, committed to himself, determined that he will continue to meditate until he find the enlightenment. Okay, and so after a long time he reached the state of enlightenment, and that is what is called Buddha. Okay, so Buddha means enlightenment or fully awakening. Okay, so he became a Buddha, and yes, in Buddhism they believe there are multiple Buddhas, and the ultimate purpose, ultimate goal of a Buddhist practitioner is for themselves to become a Buddha. Okay, so, and from Buddhist viewpoint, it is believed that every sentient being has the seed to become a Buddha. Everyone, without any discrimination, gender, nationality, whatever, everyone who has consciousness, everyone who has a soul, that soul is considered seed of enlightenment, seed of becoming a Buddha. So that is, so he, Siddhartha, the young prince, became a Buddha. He was 35 years old. So, 10 years younger than me. So he became a Buddha, and then he started to, teach, what he have, understood. And so, in brief, he's saying that he understood the suffering, he understood there is suffering, and he understood that there are causes of suffering. That's what he didn't understand before. He saw, the illness and so on, but he didn't know what the causes and conditions are. So he understood the causes and suffering, and then he didn't stop there. He tried to understand, is there anything that we can do about it? Are there any steps that we can take to eliminate suffering, or at least reduce suffering? That's what he tried. And so the first teaching, after he became a Buddha, gave the what is called the teaching of Four Noble Truths. Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths is that first is the truth of suffering. It is true that there are suffering of different kinds. Normally, when we think about suffering, maybe we, most people think that it's something to do with, just a physical illness. But there are more than that. He is talking about, that is what he called suffering of suffering, which is obvious, the pain and so on, that is suffering. But also, he's talking about pervasive suffering. Suffering of change, for example. Suffering of change is like normally we enjoy, our favorite dish or drinks. But if we continue to eat, the favorite dish, if we continue to drink our favorite drink, then at some point we may get sick, right? So you see how it changes from, joy to ill and suffering and pain. That is, the suffering of change. And then he was also talking about how, people may suffer because, of, not getting what they want. Also, getting more of what they don't want. Right? So suffering of different kinds. That's the truth of suffering. And then the truth of, so that is first, but then, okay, now we understand that there are suffering, but what does it do? What does it do if there is no way out of it, right? If there is no way out of it, what does it do to understand there is suffering? So Siddhartha Buddha said, he proceeded to the second step, which is suffering doesn't come from nowhere. They do have causes and conditions. Okay? So that is the truth of origins of suffering. Suffering has causes and conditions. And then, if there are causes and conditions, what does it say to us? It doesn't give any hope to us. Right? If there are causes and conditions, And that means it arises only when there are causes and conditions. What if we are able to minimize those causes and conditions? What if we are able to prevent those causes and conditions? Then there will be no fruit, right, of suffering. So that is the truth of cessation. The suffering could be ceased, suffering could be reduced. Okay, and then, we wish to eliminate suffering, and there is a way to eliminate suffering, but if there is no action, what does it do? Right? So that is the final part, which is the truth path to enlightenment. So yes, there is solution, there are causes, but we have to actually walk the talk. Right? So that is the practice, the path. And this analogy is like, there is, for example, if someone is sick, first thing is to diagnose that, realize that somebody is sick. So only when we understand that we are sick, then we go to diagnose what the issue is. And when we find what the issue is, then nurses and doctors and practitioners, therapists can prescribe something, right? And then, but even if that doctor prescribes something, what does it do if you don't take a prescription, right? So that is the path that the practice, and that is the first teaching of Buddha, the Four Noble Truths. And so yes, we talk about causes of suffering. There are different causes. I mean, there are medical conditions that brings us pain and suffering. There are physical conditions. There are mental conditions, emotional, but many of the pain and suffering that we experience in the world today are human-made, right? Think about the health hazards and disasters and so on. Many of them are contributed by humans' disregard to the nature and deforestation and so on, right? And so many of them, including war, are human-made. And so that is where middle way approach could be applied. So that is, why does that happen? Because many times people do indulge in things. Okay, so for example, people want extreme or excessive power, status, and certain things they want excessively, and for that reason they would disrespect others and others' rights and so on. Right? They may use any possible means to get what they wish to, right? Their desire. Okay. But then, on the other hand, there are also negligence, and so either too obsessive of something or too negligent of something. And those are many times those causes many problems and pains in the world. And so what an example is that one day when this young prince Siddhartha, that's before he became a Buddha, again, before he became a Buddha, he was observing a musician tuning his sitar. Sitar is like Indian, traditional musical instrument that is like a guitar, right? So a string instrument. So he observed one, musician tuning his sitar. The musician tuned too tight. The string snaps. What does that mean? That doesn't produce music, right? But then he was afraid, so he was tuning again with a new string, but he tuned too loose. You try to play, it's not producing music, right? So, it has to be tuned right, with balance, so that it produces good music. and that came to that Siddhartha. He remembered that incident that he saw in previous, when he was in the kingdom, and so he was like, yes. Remember that sitar, when it is tuned balanced, then it produces good music. That is the middle path. If I'm depriving too much, or if I'm indulging too much, both of those brings issues, problems. So if I keep balance, and that is, that brings beautiful melody to life. Okay, so that is the middle way philosophy, middle way theory that he used in so many of his teachings and way of living. Or he lived a minimalist life, right? So just taking what he needs, not submitting to his wants. Okay. So related to that is an important, related quote from Mahatma Gandhi from India. So Gandhiji said, "The world can provide for the needs of everyone, but the world cannot fulfill wants of even one person." Right? So if we don't check or read, we may want to own the entire world. Even maybe we want to own the moon and star and everything, right? But so the world has this limitation, and so this is related to what we are talking about, keeping it balanced so that we are not too ready to that may bring extra suffering to ourselves and to others, right? Okay, so that's related to mindfulness, and so when we are mindful of our present moment, our conditions, our thoughts, then we are aware. That means when we are aware of what we are talking, how we are behaving, and what we are thinking, there are less chances to hurt oneself and less chances to hurt others. Yes. So that is how mindfulness is important, to not only live present moment, but also to minimize suffering and add to the joy and happiness in our daily life. Okay, so being conscious of the present moment, and some of you might have read or heard about Thich Nhat Hanh, and this is, he is a Buddhist master from Vietnam. He just recently passed away, and so he is like, I have arrived, I am home. In the here and in the now, it is very simple, yet it is very profound. Right? We are all here, and many times we are physically at home, but are we home or not is determined by if we are mentally there or not. Right? If we are here and now with our mind, with our full attention, with our mind, that is, we are home. Without our mind in here, we may be staying in the house that we purchased, but we may not be home often. Right? So there is a simple practice that we can apply in daily life to be mindful from Buddhist perspective. And so I have some. So I will skip the karma part, and maybe I will give some time, a few minutes for question and answer, just to summarize from Buddhist viewpoint. Buddhism believe that we all, not just human beings, but also our pets, other animals and so on, are part of this world and part of the universe. We all, individually, we might be small, but we are all unique, and we all are playing important roles in in the bigger universe. Okay, so we are all part of it. And that's why it is important to understand and recognize that, because it helps us to reduce loneliness. Okay? When we are feeling we belong to this world, then we feel less lonely. Without which, even if we live in a big family, we may feel alone. Right? So, we are all part of the world, we are all same human beings with emotions. We all want to be happy, we don't want to suffer, we have different emotions. We are all, alike. We are more alike than different, right? Yes. So, we share the common goal, and therefore, if our common goal is to be happy and to not to suffer, that means we have to be mindful of our behavior and actions and thoughts, because our thoughts, our physical and verbal behaviors, actions could impact well-being of ourselves as well as well-being of others. And as we all want to be happy, we don't want our behaviors to be negative or harmful for our well-being, which goes against our goal. Right? Thank you. So this is a summary from Buddhist viewpoint, and maybe if we can have a few minutes for question and answer. Sorry for taking longer time. Thank you.
I'd like to say something. There's a quote that I keep in front of my desk for work,
Yes.
and I believe it's a Buddhist quote, and it says, "Be the change that you wish to see in the world." And it's something that every day I strive at that. I don't know which quote was, but
This is from Gandhi.
Oh, okay.
Gandhi, be the change.
Okay.
Yes.
It was someone who was inspirational for me, so
Yes.
it's right in front of my desk, and I recite it every day.
Yes. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Could you say a little bit about karma?
Sure. So, karma, there are misunderstandings about karma in general. When something bad happens to you, and then people say, that's your karma. It has a negative connotation to it. But in actuality, karma means action. Okay, Sanskrit term karma, and Tibetan term is le, which means action. Okay, so how does that work with Buddhist theory? Alright, action. Okay, so the theory, karma theory is that if you do good action, goodness comes as a result. If you do negative action, suffering comes as a result. Alright, and if you do neutral actions, it may not bring you any joy or suffering. There are neutral karma. So there are three types: positive karma, negative karma, and neutral karma. Okay? So it is believed that when somebody accumulates in every action, for example, eating, right? When we, thank you for the delicious meal, it's very nice and we enjoy it, but whether our process of eating that dinner becomes positive karma or negative karma depends on your motivation. Depends on your intention. Right? How come? Right? How come? If two persons is eating same dish from same cook, one eating can become positive karma, the other can become negative karma. How come? That is, maybe one person is eating the dinner because he or she wants to get some energy so that he or she can fight. Right? The other person is eating food so that they can get energy to, do some goodness. Right? That becomes positive karma. With the negative intention, it becomes negative karma. So everything, including washing and taking shower or everything that we do from Buddhist viewpoint, either it can be positive or negative, depending on what result it produces. If it produces more joy and happiness, it's usually tend to be positive karma. If it brings more suffering and pain, it's tend to be into negative karmas. Yes, please.
So, all life is suffering. Suffering is caused by attachment. Attachment can be overcome by suffering.
Thank you. Yes.
I love the concept that you gave about being in the house, but not being there.
Yes.
You know, I know sometimes when, so it's the idea of just being present to the moment, rather than being stuck in all of the past mistakes I've made, or the anxiety where the past mistakes cause me depression. Oh, I shouldn't have done this. Why am I thinking about all this? Why did I get to this place? Or the anxious thoughts of the future,
Yes.
where I'm worried about what is yet to happen or could happen. And so I'm not actually really being there in the house and enjoying the house.
Yes.
I love that concept.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Yes. There is a quote that I like very much. It is, I don't know the exact author, but it's contributed to 2 or 3 different authors. So, but it's the same concept, is that the past is history.
Yes.
The future is mystery. Yes. So, today is present.
Yes.
Enjoy it.
Yeah.
So yes, it helps to be, to release lots of burdens, emotional and, even physical tension and so on, because many times we tend to, fill our mind and space in our mind with regrets and guilt and so on, and then sometimes we fill our mind with, worry and sadness and anxiety and so on, that is about future. We don't know whether it will come or not, but we already started to perceive that this will happen, and so we worried about it, we are anxious about it, we are fearful about it, and therefore those emotions burden our daily life so much, and therefore, and when we are able to focus on the present, we are able to say, let go of those burdens, and we feel much relief. Yes, please.
One of the things that I really appreciated that you said is about the mindfulness of being in space. I'm an Army brat, and so we travel every 4 years, every 3 years, and people will say to me, where are you from? And I realized, probably in my 30s, that wherever I am is home.
Yes.
I don't have home anywhere else, but where I am, wherever I am, is home. Because it's within you, not outside of you.
Absolutely. I mean, when we are able to, adapt to this concept, I think it will help us so much, help so many people to feel less alone and more, alive, and enjoy their life and reduce their, many feelings that are difficult to live with. Yes, please.
You talked about the path to enlightenment. Now, obviously, that's a lifelong process. Well, are there people who are considered enlightened ones today? Or are there any modern Buddhas, or is that the one and we all just aspire to that?
What can you tell?
Good question, right? Sorry, I cannot.
Other religions too.
It's all along.
Yes, good example. So, I can tell that I'm not good right now. I have a long way to go to become fully enlightened. But yes, there are, practices with which from Buddhist viewpoint, people, anybody can become a Buddha, can become enlightened. So there are some examples, as you mentioned, many Tibetans and many Buddhists believe that Dalai Lama is an example of, a Buddha. But so they believe sincerely that he is the modern day Buddha. But when, of course, you can see when, media ask him about that, he denies that he's just a simple monk. Yes, right? So he's a simple monk, that's what he says. And so I believe that I even cannot say there is no Buddha among you here. There could be Buddhas among us here. So it is, something that is to do with our own mind. And the thing is that from Buddhist viewpoint, mind is defined as something formless that can reflect, they can understand, they can, sense and so on. So it is formless that we cannot see somebody's mind. We can see expression that is maybe sometimes we get proper reading, sometimes maybe wrong reading. Somebody who is angry may still be laughing, somebody who may not be laughing may be happy. Expression is different from what is really inside us, right, mind. So it's difficult to tell. But generally speaking, yes, anyone and everyone can become a Buddha.
Tell me about anger from the Buddhist point of view, because it pretty much runs the world.
Yes.
People are suffering. If I'm angry, I'm suffering. It's really hard to get with that.
Yes.
So, tell me about that.
Yes. So in Buddhist studies, there are so many emphasis on developing positive emotions and reducing negative emotions. Okay? And the reason is that positive emotions tend to bring joy and happiness, and negative emotions tend to lead oneself and others towards chaos and difficulties. That's the main. It's based on how do you define something as a positive or negative from Buddhist view. It depends on the impact. Okay, what it entails, define whether something is good or bad. Okay, so in terms of anger, of course, we are all human beings and we have different emotions, and especially when we see that something unjust or discrimination and so on things happening, we might feel that emotion. From Buddhist perspective, it is advisable that we reduce anger. Okay, if possible, don't get angry. But so it takes lots of practice, it takes lots of experiences, and but then there are different levels, different intensities. I mean, for example, sometimes we call one emotion angry or anger, but then whether that kind of disapproving emotion of something, whether that leads to do something good, whether that leads to I want to help reduce that suffering, or I want to attack that people, that differs whether that becomes positive or negative. Okay? So generally speaking, anger, of course, is what is called in the category of negative emotions or afflictive emotions. Okay? So what is afflictive emotions? And what does they do? What do they do, right? So afflictive emotions are emotions that hinders our rational thinking and rational understanding and seeing the true nature of phenomena. Okay? So in our car, as we see, I was using the defroster before, right? So when we see fog in the car, right? And unless we use the defroster fog is going to cover our vision, and that cause danger, that may lead us to, harm's way, right? We don't see the correct path, and so we may go off the road. That is an example of when it comes to emotion, anger sometimes leads us off the path towards harm. And that's why it is advised that we reduce anger rather than enhancing it.
How do you handle passion? If you're a passionate person, it comes to what you're talking about. Is passion allowed?
Yes. Okay. So, yes, I think, it's similar to passion. I mean, a deep interest, keen interest in doing something, learning something, achieving something. So that, I think, interest is good because everything, from Buddhist viewpoint, everything is preceded by mind. Okay, nothing happens without mind. That means if my mind is interested in going to Westerly, then my body comes here. Without my mind's interest, I will not be here. So therefore, in order to do goodness, right, so we have to be interested. And also there are different levels of interest. And passion is one of the greatest interests, with which we might even sacrifice many other things to achieve something good. So that means passion towards something good is of course good, but if it's passion towards something harmful, maybe not so good. Right? But this relates to another point, which is, what's different between love and attachment? From Buddhist viewpoint, is love good? Is attachment good? Are they same? Are they different? So from, similar concept to think about. From Buddhist viewpoint, love is totally considered very positive, but attachment is considered negative. But why and how and why for, right? That we have to think about.
I think about passion. I love that question about passion, right? And I think about like the passion of anger, right? Like if you're a passion that overtakes you and enslaves you, and one that that you pursue and you can't get out of, that can lead you into negative things. But I like this idea about mindfulness and awareness, and knowing when you can engage in your passions that's positive, and when you and you can also, if you're aware of when you're engaged in something and it's negative, you could avoid it. Yes. You could say, no, why? Look at the consequence. And I think that mindfulness and awareness piece is so wonderful from Buddhism perspective.
I have benefited from it. Yes. I feel benefited from it. Yes. Yes.
But isn't there a place for attachment? I'm thinking, a child growing up needs to be attached to the parental figure. A couple needs to be attached to each other to get, to life together.
I see.
The deep and long-standing attachments that seem to be very positive, that give people meaning to their lives. I wonder how I see that.
Okay. So that leads to another question is, what do I mean by attachment? What do Buddhism mean by attachment? Right? So there might be, different categories, different meanings, right? So just in simple words, just an example, right? If somebody, love is like what can I do to make you happy? Attachment is, what can you do to make me happy? So yes, attachment, for example, and when I am attached to something or somebody, I want to achieve that to fulfill my desire, my wish, and what is the problem with that? Is because when I want something, somebody to be exactly the way I want, I disrespect that person's right and their value and their wishes, and therefore that is why it's considered negative. Okay, attachment could be more controlling. Love is more free. I love you. You can do whatever makes you happy. I am ready to support you. That is freeing. That is love from Buddhist viewpoint. Okay.
So another word for the attachment would be projection. You project on the other.
Yes, right. So you, basically project what you want and your value and whatever onto others, so that you want others to do that, so that you feel happy.
But we also, with attachment, I find sometimes that it is enabling. It allows people to continue with very bad habits. And I think that's a difficulty, because you think you're loving them and helping them by being forgiving and letting them continue down these paths. And you were talking about the expression, whatever you express is the middle way, is your impact. If you're doing something and the impact is bad, then it is a negative attachment or a negative. And then the other way is that if the loving or the attachment has an impact, it's an expression that has an impact, and the impact is to the good, then it is a good thing. And I think people mix that up sometimes, because I often see a lot of enabling, just allowing small children to be totally obnoxious, to adults being needy, to where they don't pay attention that their children now need space, and you can't tell the grandchildren what to do. Parents said no. I think attachment is a difficult and slippery area.
Yes. That reminds me of another important point with compassion, right? Many people think that when you are compassionate for somebody, people think that, you let the person do whatever he or she wants. And the point of compassion is not that. The meaning of compassion from Buddhist viewpoint is a sincere wish to help ourselves or others to reduce suffering, to get free from suffering. Okay? But if we let a person do whatever they are doing to inflict more suffering on themselves and others, that's not the goal of compassion. That goes against the goal of compassion. Right? So you don't necessarily submit yourself or let the person do whatever they want if that is negative. But still, it could be loving, it could still be compassion. Of course, though that depends on how you do it, right?
I ask one more basic question. I recently saw the movie Kanzumi, which is the life of the Dalai Lama. And supposedly he is the 14th.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
But Buddha was around 5,000 years ago, so 14 doesn't seem to fit. I don't know how that, what they mean by the 14th. And also he was regarded as a reincarnation of the Buddha. Can you address that a little bit, please?
Sure. So, yes, very quickly, the current Dalai Lama is the 14th Dalai Lama. That means he is the reincarnation of the 13th Dalai Lama.
Okay, I see.
Yes. So when the 13th Dalai Lama, reincarnation of the 13th Dalai Lama. So he passed away he passed away kind of like much in a younger age. And before he passed away, he said, I am going away to a great space for leader of troubled times. Okay, so he passed away and not long after that, the 14th was born, and then you know what happened in Tibet with the Communist party rising in China and overtaking Tibet. And then this young Dalai Lama, when he was a teenager, he was actually kind of asked by people to lead his country in the difficult time. So that fits the narration of the 13th Dalai Lama when he passed away. And so again, there are the people believe that he is the Dalai Lama is the reincarnation of Avalokiteshvara. Avalokiteshvara is a bodhisattva, or some people say Buddha, of compassion. So he is not same as Shakyamuni Buddha, who was born there. So there are multiple Buddhas, as you know. In Buddhism, there are both male and female figures, like different Taras, female Buddhas. So there are different Buddhas, and the Dalai Lama is considered to be that of Avalokiteshvara, but the reincarnation is of the 13th. Thank you very much.
Thank you.